Philosophers talk to our times. Natural history of middle. Kant and the three constellations of middle positions. Kant of the Critique of Pure Reason is a book that I always held very close in my heart because it was the first proper philosophy book I think I properly understood. It took me about 6 months of constant reading. And I got to the end. I was very proud of myself. The final 100 pages of Critique of Pure Reason are always a wonderful read. Anyway, another story. Kant is very interesting in his middle positions because there are some ones he wants to avoid. And always what he's doing is he's, of course, being Kant, creating a careful hierarchy where each middle position has their role. And the minute they step beyond that role, the entire edifice collapses. It ends up as beautifully brittle. And it's worth spending a bit of time going through these middle positions. I'm actually going to spend 3 days going through each critique and its middle position, because they each have a slightly different one, starting off with a dominant one. And I'm doing that because I will finish this series on Friday with a kind of what is to be done section. There's a reason for that. It's just personal family commitments and all that. And I'll come back to it, I think, in September. And in September, I'm going to try and lay the ghosts, the two middle positions I haven't considered that I've clearly got to consider, that I need to do a bit more reading and thinking before I do, which is Hegel and Bergson. But in order to go through their positions and why the dialectic is not a middle, or whether it is a middle position, but not all there is to say, and why the élan vital is barely a middle position at all, although it has aspects of it, I think it's really important to clarify Kant, because I couldn't imagine doing it without doing Kant first. And anyway, I can just do Kant, so Kant we're going to do. In the first critique, then, Kant has various moves in the middle, reacting probably to Hume. He wants to restrict, and also in a sense to Berkeley, who he's kind of pulling out and improving. It's very interesting what he does with impressions. He says, so impressions would be intuitions, not Kantian intuition, but Humean or Bergson or Berkeley intuitions, perceptions. And Kant makes a very interesting, very barbed remark towards Hume. It's blink and you miss it, but it's there. The manifold of impressions offer a manifold, but not one that can be ever gathered together in a single consciousness of mind. The middle of another is always then that which is where the mind is literally caught up in the tumble of perceptions, each perception always in the middle of another, but the mind itself cannot resolve those into a single thought. Each one then exists as a single note, almost discordant with the others, and yet caught up in them, unable to be distinguished, unable to be held together, each separate and apart. The middle of in Kant, therefore, becomes an anarchy, a place of impressions and of manifolds that are unreconcilable. It's kind of the Hume world if you don't have vivacity, and only have what vivacity causes, the final stages, general ideas. And therefore it all must be run through and held together, and that is of course where reason creates the categories of judgment, and judgment then create categories of understanding. That is ways to sort through all of this chaos. And the categories of understanding then reach into the mind through schematicism and transcendental imagination, and give us concepts of time and of space. And that's kind of the overview, but the positions really emerge within the moves that are made. So I'm on the transcendental dialectic here, as I always am, and I'm always on A. I think I've read somewhere that the difference between European philosophers and English and American philosophers is whether they prefer the transcendental dialectic first version or second version. I always use the first version. It's the version I can cite. The second version, a little bit passed me by, because basically it was saying, I think, I hope. I've proved it. Probably a bit unfair. But anyway, so it is, of course, the role of apprehension and recollection to run through and hold together the middle ofs. They form them, therefore, into a middle in. The middle in that is time and space. The sense that I am caught up within a world. And that move is okay. It's a little bit kind of mysterious, because Kant doesn't really explain what transcendental imagination ever is. So it's very much means of a meanness. It's very important, though, within what Kant's doing, to understand its kind of philosophical importance. And to do that, I always at this point talk about apprehension. Apprehension could be just understood as the threshold of the now. The moment things tumble in, that they're framed within the mind. Heidegger does that. Lyotard does that. But it makes far more sense to my mind if given time is of the essence in all that is to be understood. That's a near quote. If you understand apprehension as the running through and holding together, not at a moment, but into the future. The impressions then are always crowding in one upon another. And what you actually have to do is order the time sequence, give them a time sequence, make each impression dependent upon the next impression, run them through and hold them together by making them the gateway of the next. And that gateway of the next then understands the relationship with recollection. Because recollection is therefore just the recording of the past. A past that is already a line moving forwards, because it is always, always, always into the future. That's the sense then that apprehension and recollection are, as Kant would say, indistinguishable from each other. One is the movement forward, and one is the holding down. And this gives Kant his full middle position. And why? Because you have to understand the importance of what Kant's done here, the importance of this middle, the middle in another, which is the future, but also the holding of that future in a past, is that effectively he has freed, if it needed freeing, philosophy from Aristotle. You see, Aristotle in the now fundamentally makes philosophy look backwards. Time is a man running backwards, looking always behind him. There's always a first moment of the now and never a moment that it is about to arrive. There's always a framing then of the impressions in a time sequence. These are these ones here, these are these ones here, these are these ones here. The Heideggerian reading of Kant puts him firmly in the Aristotelian trajectory, with a threshold across which things have to tumble. But understood aright, I would think that Kant is the exact opposite. Time becomes a man running forward, looking always to what is, remembering where he's been, yeah, but it's always moving forward. So it is always the breaking of the now. It's utter destruction in the what is to come. And for me, it's the only way you actually make sense of the second transcendental dialectic, where he's clearly wanting to think about continual time. He's uncomfortable with the idea, I actually think, which is why he rewrites the dialectic. He doesn't want to formally state it, but it is time moving forwards. And that, of course, means the intuitions are a true middle in another position, because you're only caught up in them as they are always giving you a time that is moving forward and holding on to what has been. And then, of course, crisscrossing that, you have the concepts of understanding. Now, here, schematicism, of course, works, because schematicism is reason working through another, always through another, as it reaches down, modifies what it is, understands the temporal flows through a schematicism that is moderating the role of transcendental imagination towards concepts and concepts towards transcendental imagination. What it is, therefore, is using time to understand how other things emerge through it. It is a classic, move careful through another position. As you are thinking about what is there, you are always holding it up to the yardstick of the through the other, understanding it through through what was there, through what will be there. It is the role of understanding to chop up on its broad form the temporal flow into different presents, different moments, different points of understanding, different units of time, be those things that happen together, or that boat, that large building I stand before, or that boat that is floating down the stream. It is the role of understanding, more using using categories that are applying to the world to create middle through positions that allow you to understand, allow you to chop up the temporal flow. And above those, of course, are the concepts of understanding. And concepts of understanding within this position of Kant is always middle four. As a rule, things that originate in reason in Kant are middle four positions. So once you actually have a concept in itself, it never exists as an intuition. It's a concept. It's a product of understanding. It understands the world, but then takes all those perceptions and pitches them against all the other possible perceptions. They tell you how they will interlink with them, when they will matter, when they won't matter. It creates then a middle four position. It creates this temporal flow as part of a greater sequence of temporal flows, of being caught up in all the rest. And above all of that, of course, you have the I think, which is, again, a supreme middle four. I only exist for the rest. It is me that is doing the thinking, me that is arranging all of these together in one single concept. So each one has to exist for the others, for the others, for the others. And so Kant, in the first critique, wants to present then a sequence of middle positions, each ordered. I'll come back with a middle with another time. I'm going to do that tomorrow, because that is peculiarly for practical reason, which is in itself quite interesting. The problems then come in the critique of reason. What makes a critique of reason critical is when you understand the middle four as simply existing. Within the Kantian format, middle four does not imply the existence any more than the idea of God implies his existence, any more than the idea I have 20 failures implies the existence of those failures. The existence doesn't add anything to the concept, because the concept is always middle four. It doesn't work, therefore, because it has to be in the here and the now. It works into being pitched across all the rest. And that is the nature of anything that is coming from reason. It is always not in itself, but rather the regulatory principle, that which sets up the landscape for the middle throughs and the middle ins. It's the middle for another position. It's restricted, and he deliberately restricts it, but palpably there. It's worth pointing out that as long as ideas don't demand that they have to actually exist in the same way that gold coins exist or trees exist, there is no particular reason that they don't have some kind of being. Being is some kind of becoming. I've got my eye on Deleuze there, as Deleuze scholars will automatically know. The point is that they could be virtually real. All that matters is they don't have actual existence. And their ability to be in the middle four doesn't imply actual existence. Because the minute it does, you get caught in the impossible impasses of the antinomies of reason. You get caught then in saying that the world could both be infinitely divisible but cannot be infinitely divisible. That there must be a first cause but there can't be a first cause. And the rest. Because all of these are mistaking something that is a middle for another as an actually existing thing, which it never was. And so Kant can therefore destroy all notions of reason that want to simply claim that reason can just simply legislate directly for the world, as if it was actual and existing, as if it was a middle four in position. But it never was, Kant would say. It's always four. And one of the things that I think critical pure reason does is it clears up very, very well, to a degree at any rate, the sense that the middle four never exists in any here and now. It's always open. It's always an event that exists in affecting all the other events. It's always virtual, as Deleuze would have it. And so its relationship with the world is always complicated. So Kant, then, through each one of his positions, is creating I guess what he's creating a quartet. He's creating a way in which each one has to respect their role and allow all the others to simply exist. And the entire mind could be described as a middle with another. Because how you understand and how you understand effectively is to allow each one of these to exist in their own particular role, their own particular position. So good judgment comes about understanding these relations, this middle within another position. But I'll come back to that tomorrow. So Kant represents, in the natural history of middle, a very interesting, very detailed account, one that is, of course, trying to exclude ontology, and does it through, interestingly, excluding anything unique about impressions. Impressions, that is, our actual encounter with the outside world, is dismissed the middle of another and said, that can't be real. It can give us nothing. And because it can give us nothing, ontology, that is the direct link between myself and the outside world, they're able to understand the being of that outside world as it is in itself, is of course impossible. Because impressions, our encounter with it is just a jumble. The middle position is therefore moved firmly within my idea, what I am, my conceptions of space and of time. As a way of understanding the independent mind trying to understand the world as a naked eye, it no doubt clears up how you can form certain sorts of knowledge, certainly. As a way of actually understanding what it means to be in the world, to be a mortal thing existing as a body, of course, it does nothing. And it is impossible, and it is difficult to free it from that Nietzschean's perspective that it is simply asserting what it already believed anyway, which is that there are souls understanding the world and that this is just the middle of a middle. Nor it needs to be said before I finish, is the I think a terribly convincing unifying principle. I said, and those of you who are listening carefully, there was a clear paradox in it. Kant wants to say that the I think is a middle position, but then he implies it's an I that's thinking. And actually middles can't have eyes. That's the point of them. They don't really work like that. He is trying to create a botched concept that actually creates an I that is in another, and yet he's using the mechanics of the for another. And the result is that there's no particular reason it has to be an I think. It could be an it thinks, it think. And once it's one it thinks, why isn't it myriad it thinks? Because he has to be using the empirical unity of consciousness to say that it is just a single it, which is a very weak evidence for Kant. All there has to be is communication to these different forms of consciousness. As an epileptic, I can guarantee him I have more than one way of being conscious. But it doesn't mean that I don't gather perceptions together and hold them down and run them through and hold them together. It's just that I don't have an I think or an it thinks when I'm doing it. I'm pitched into a wild chaos. So that the entire argument, in the end, its linchpin is attempting to do two middle positions at once. It's pretending to do in another and for another at the same moment. And the entire thing pitches because there's nothing simple, as Nietzsche would say, about that move. No simple, obvious truth. No key arc. No unity. And so the entire thing ultimately collapses because it can't hold the key arc of its middle position down. Which is one of those interesting things about Kant. When you hear it, you read it and you understand it, you go, yeah, it's fine, I really get that. But in the end, it doesn't work. And we live in the ruin of the fact that it doesn't work.